are standing in the East Wing corridor at 5 minutes past midnight, and the only sound in the world is the tick of a clock you cannot see. You have polished this floor. You know every plank in it. You know which one creaks near the third window and which one holds silent even under weight. You know this building the way you know the lines of your own hand, which is to say completely and without ever having been asked to. There is a room upstairs where a man wept last Tuesday, and you were the one who remade his bed afterward. There is a hallway where two men argued in low voices about something that will change the shape of the country, and you carried a tray past them without breaking stride. They did not lower their voices. They never do. You have worked in this house for 11 years. You have served 4 families. You have seen a child buried from these rooms. You have poured coffee for men whose names will be in every history book your grandchildren will ever read, and not one of those books will mention your name. Your name is Ida. You are 34 years old. You were born in Virginia to a family that was still, at the time of your birth, not legally free. By the time you were 16, the war was over. By the time you were 22, you were pressing linen in a boarding house in Washington, and you were good enough at it that someone noticed, and someone else noticed after that. And eventually a woman named Mrs. Hemings, who had worked the upper floors of the White House for 9 years, looked you over in the doorway of that boarding house kitchen and said you had the right kind of quiet about you. You did not know what that meant then. You know what it means now. The right kind of quiet means this: you move through rooms as though you are not there. You anticipate what will be needed before it is asked for. You absorb what you see and hear, and you carry it inside you without letting it show on your face. And you do not speak of it, not to anyone, not ever. You carry 11 years of this house inside you. What you carry would fill a book. None of it will ever be written down. There is a hallway on the second floor where a painting hangs slightly crooked, and it has hung slightly crooked for 3 years, and you have straightened it 400 times, and every morning it is crooked again. You do not know who tilts it. You have never caught anyone. It is one of the small mysteries of this house, and after 11 years, this house has given you many of them. There is a room that smells of camphor and old paper and something underneath both of those things, something older, and you have cleaned that room every week for a decade and you still do not know what it is. There are things you have seen that you will take to your grave. Not because you were told to, because that is what this work requires. You are about to begin your shift. It is 1881. The president sleeping upstairs is James Garfield, and he has been in this house for 4 months, and he does not yet know that he will not leave it alive. Neither do you. You pick up your tray, you check the lamp, you begin. This is Quiet History at Bedtime, and if this is your kind of story, a subscribe means everything right now. Every detail in this story comes from the historical record. Just relax and feel free to let this play as you drift off to sleep. Now, let us begin. You were born in Culpeper County, Virginia, in October of 1847. Your mother's name was Rose. Your father's name was Daniel, though he was called by another name by the family that owned him, and that name was the one that appeared in their records, not his. This is one of the first things you understood about the world. that the names other people give you are not your names. You are the property of no one. You have been free, legally, since January of 1863. But the law and the lived reality of a thing are two separate countries, and you have spent your adult life navigating the border between them. Washington, D.C. in 1870, when you first arrived, was a city in the middle of deciding what it was going to be. The war had ended 5 years earlier. The city was flooded with freedmen from across Virginia and Maryland and the Carolinas, tens of thousands of people building new lives in a city that was not always glad to have them. There were neighborhoods in Washington that were almost entirely black. Neighborhoods with their own churches and schools and newspapers and doctors. Neighborhoods that functioned as small cities inside the larger one. 7th Street ran through the heart of one such neighborhood, lined with barber shops and tailors and dry goods merchants, all black-owned, all doing the work of constructing a world. You lived on the edge of that world. You worked in the white world during the day and came home to your own world at night, and the two did not often touch. The White House, when you first entered it, was not yet the building it would become. In 1870 it was drafty and under-maintained, with a boiler system that failed regularly and a kitchen that had not been properly modernized since the Fillmore administration. The East Wing, where the domestic staff worked, smelled of damp wool and cooked cabbage and the faint sweetness of hot linen. The staff numbered around 30, and of those 30, the majority were black. This was not a coincidence. This was a structure. The upper positions, the head usher, the steward, the chief engineer, were held by white men, many of them holdovers from previous administrations, men who had learned the rhythms of the House under Buchanan or Lincoln or Johnson, and who remained when the families changed. Below them were the maids, the laundresses, the kitchen workers, the footmen, the porters, the coal handlers. These positions were almost entirely filled by black workers, many of them from Virginia or Maryland, many of them with connections to one another through churches or neighborhoods or family ties going back before emancipation. This is the world you entered at 23. You started in the laundry. Mrs. Hemings, who had brought you in, supervised the linen room and the laundry, and she ran it with a precision that you came to understand was not about cleanliness alone. It was about proof. Every sheet that left that laundry was proof of competence. Every tablecloth was an argument. The standard in that room was higher than it needed to be, and everyone who worked in it understood why. There was no margin for less. The laundry room was in the basement. In summer, it was close to unbearable. In winter, it was the warmest place in the building. You worked it for 2 years before Mrs. Hemings moved you upstairs. The lye soap you used on the president's linen ate into your hands. It was made from wood ash and water, the same method it had been made for 200 years, and it cleaned cotton better than anything else available. And it cost something. The cracks in your knuckles never fully healed during those years. In winter they bled at the joints. You did not complain. Complaint was not a luxury available to you in that room. The White House employed a head laundress who oversaw 4 or 5 women, and the work moved on a fixed schedule that accounted for the entire house. Bed linens were changed twice a week for the family rooms, weekly for the guest rooms, and as needed for the staff quarters, which meant less often. Table linens were laundered after every formal dinner, of which there were frequently 3 or 4 per week during the social season. The social season ran from December through March and was the most demanding time in the house, the time when everything was expected to be perfect and nothing ever quite was. You learned to starch a collar so precisely that it could have stood on its own. You learned to remove blood from white cotton with cold water and salt before the heat of the iron set it forever. You learned which of the family's dresses were delicate enough to require hand washing and which could bear the full treatment. You learned the difference between clean and White House clean. They are not the same thing. After 2 years in the laundry, Mrs. Hemmings brought you upstairs because one of the maids on the family floor had become ill and there was no one else ready. She brought you to the door of the second floor where the family rooms were, and she said to you in a voice that was almost no voice at all, "You see nothing, you hear nothing, and you make everything right." That is all. You have been making everything right ever since. The second floor of the White House in the 1870s was a working floor and a living floor at the same time. There were no private family quarters in the modern sense. The president worked out of rooms that were separated from the family's bedrooms by only a hallway. Visitors, petitioners, congressmen, office seekers, all of them came and went through spaces that were also where the family lived. The separation between public and private life in that house was thin, sometimes non-existent, and it fell to the domestic staff to maintain whatever boundary existed. Your job on the family floor was to be present without being visible. You made beds, you emptied slop jars, you brought fresh water in the morning and took away the old. You kept the fires in the family rooms through the winter months, carrying coal up the back stairs in a metal bucket that weighed close to 20 pounds when full. You replaced the kerosene in the lamps, trimmed the wicks, polished the glass globes until they were clear as water. You moved through those rooms like weather moves through a place, present and necessary and unremarked upon. There were things you saw. A president's wife crying alone in her sitting room at 3 in the afternoon over a letter you never knew the contents of. 2 men speaking in urgent whispers near the window at the end of the hall, and one of them putting something into his coat pocket as you turned the corner. A child of the house, one of the younger ones, standing in the dark of the front hallway in the middle of the night, not asleep, but not awake either, just standing, and you leading him back to his room with your hand on his shoulder, and neither of you saying anything. These things went into you and stayed there. That is part of the job. In 1877, Rutherford Hayes moved into the house, and his wife Lucy became one of the most attentive employers you had worked for in this place. Mrs. Hayes took a personal interest in the domestic staff. She learned names, remembered details, asked after families. She was the one who introduced the policy of no alcohol in the White House, a decision that was unpopular with some of the staff who had relied on the end of evening wine to mark the close of a long shift, but one that she held to firmly and that you respected her for, because she held to everything firmly. Under Mrs. Hayes, the house ran with a particular kind of order. She did not tolerate shoddiness. She inspected rooms herself, occasionally, which meant that your work had to be right at all times, and not only when inspection was expected. You preferred this. Inspection you could prepare for. Randomness you could not. The linen closet on the second floor held 124 sheets, 48 pillowcases, 36 towels of various grades, and 8 sets of the fine embroidered pillow covers used only for the state guest room. You knew this inventory as well as you knew your own name. You took count every Monday. You noted what was worn and what needed replacing. You submitted a written request to the head usher when something needed to be purchased, and you wrote in your careful printed letters because cursive, you had been told, was harder for some of the men in the office to read, and you had no interest in giving anyone a reason not to act on your requests. You were paid $12 per month. A skilled tradesman in Washington at this time earned between $30 and $40 per month. A government clerk earned $60. You knew these numbers. You had counted your money every month for 10 years. You knew exactly where you stood. You did not stand where you deserved to stand. This was true. It was also, as far as you could determine, not going to change in any immediate way, and so you took the $12. You sent 4 of them to your mother in Culpeper, who was by now elderly and living with your younger sister. You kept 8 for yourself, for rent and food and the small purchases that kept a life running. There was never anything left over. There was not supposed to be anything left over. In March of 1881, James Garfield was inaugurated as the 20th President of the United States, and the Hayes family packed their belongings and left the house with the particular efficient sadness that you had learned to recognize in every departing family. They did not linger. Nobody lingers here. You watched Mrs. Hayes make one last pass through the second-floor rooms, touching the door frames lightly as she walked, and then she went down the stairs and out the south entrance, and the house was empty for 3 hours before the Garfields arrived. In those 3 hours, you and the other house staff cleaned everything. Every surface, every floor, every lamp glass. Every mirror. You changed every sheet on every bed. You removed every trace of the family that had been there. This is one of the parts of the job that nobody sees, the 3 hours between families, when the house holds its breath and you remake it, when you strip it of one life and prepare it for another. It is not sad exactly. It is something else, something more like what a stage looks like between performances, when the lights are down and the chairs are empty and the whole enormous possibility of the place just sits there waiting. You tucked the corners on the president's bed with the same tension in the linen you always used, not too tight, the right amount. He would sleep in that bed for the first time that night. By July, he would be shot in a Washington train station. He would not die immediately. He would linger through the summer in this house, growing weaker, as the doctors probed the wound with unsterilized instruments and introduced the infection that would kill him. He would die in September, 11 weeks after the shooting, in a beach cottage in New Jersey where the family had taken him hoping the sea air would help. He died away from this house. Most of them do not die here. But the ones who are sick here, the ones who suffer here, the ones who lie in these beds through the long nights of illness and pain, you are the one who carries the water. You are the one who changes the linens. You are the one who is there. Tonight in March of 1881, none of that has happened yet. Garfield is healthy. He is 50 years old, a large man with a broad chest and a full dark beard, and his children are noisy and good-natured, and his wife Lucretia is sharp-eyed and kind, and the house feels, for these first weeks, the way it always feels when a new family arrives, full of the possibility that this time things will be different. Things are never different, but the possibility is real for a while. You carry the last tray of the evening up the back stairs. It is late, nearly 11. The house is quiet in its particular way, which is not truly quiet at all, but layered with sounds. The creak of the building settling, the distant hiss of the boiler, the muffled voices of the night guard doing their round. You set the tray outside the family sitting room door. A glass of warm water with a small dish of honey. Mrs. Garfield has a sore throat. You noted it in the morning when she coughed twice during inspection of the dining room arrangements and pressed 2 fingers briefly to her neck. You did not say anything. You put the tray together yourself without being asked. You have been doing things without being asked for so long that you no longer remember what it felt like to wait. The corridor is lit by 2 gas lamps turned low. The walls are papered in a dark pattern, burgundy and green, that was chosen under the Grant administration and has been there ever since. Grant's family. Hayes' family. Now Garfield's. The paper does not change. You do not change. Only the faces in the rooms change. You pause at the end of the hall. There is that painting again, the one that hangs crooked. A landscape of some river valley in Pennsylvania, green hills and a pale sky. It has been hanging in this spot since the Hayes years. Every morning it is slightly tilted to the left. Every evening you straighten it. You straighten it now. You hold your fingers against the frame for a moment, checking the level by feel. You have never needed a ruler. You take the empty breakfast tray from where you left it in the alcove that morning, tucking it under your arm, and you move down the back corridor toward the stairs. The house breathes around you. You know every sound it makes. Tomorrow is a formal dinner for 18. There will be 14 remove courses and 3 wines, though under the Garfields, as under the Hayes, the wines will be replaced with other things. There will be china from the Lincoln service, pieces of it, the ones that are still intact, supplemented with the newer Haviland set ordered under Hayes. You will have laid the table twice before the guests arrive, once to check the arrangement, and once for real. You will press the napkins in the morning, 40 minutes on the mangle for the heavy damask. You will make sure the épergne in the center of the table is filled with the right flowers, the ones that were ordered from the greenhouse last Tuesday. You will check the silver for spots, because there are always spots, no matter how carefully it was dried. And a spot on the serving spoon at a state dinner is not a possibility. You have made this house work every day for 11 years. It will work tomorrow. You reach the top of the back stairs and pause there, holding the tray, listening. Nothing unusual. The boiler sounds a little rough tonight. You will mention it to the engineer in the morning. He will not be glad to hear it. He is never glad to hear anything before his second cup of coffee. You will tell him anyway. You start down the stairs, taking each step with the careful quiet that is your particular skill, the skill that has kept you in this house when others came and went. The skill that has earned you the nod from head ushers who are not generous with nods. The skill that nobody will ever write down in any record of this place. The staircase is narrow and the tray is wide, and the lamp at the bottom flickers slightly in a draught you have never been able to locate the source of. The house settles again around you. It is a small sound, barely a sound at all. But you know it. You know every sound this house makes. You have been listening for 11 years. You reach the bottom of the stairs. You set the tray on the kitchen table. You check the lamp. Tomorrow the dining room will need to be perfect. The state dinner is in 2 days. The flowers from the greenhouse will arrive in the morning, and they will need to be cut to the right length, not too short, and arranged in the epernay with the fern backing that Mrs. Garfield has indicated she prefers, though she has not said so directly, only glanced at the arrangement from the previous dinner with an expression that told you everything you needed to know. You have been reading expressions in this house for 11 years. You have become very good at it. You set the kitchen to rights. The night cook has left things in reasonable order, but not your order. You shift 3 things back to where they belong. It takes 30 seconds. You are not unkind about it. Everyone has their own method, and the night cook's method is close enough to yours that the correction is small. You hang your apron on the hook by the door. You take your coat from the rack. You pause in the doorway of the kitchen and look back at the room. The pots hang in their places. The fire in the range is banked for the night. The table is clear. The lamp burns steadily. Everything is as it should be. You turn and go out into the cold. The walk from the White House back to your room is 12 minutes if you go at a normal pace, which you do. It is late enough that the streets are mostly quiet. There is a man selling roasted sweet potatoes from a cart on the corner of 15th. The same man who has been there every night this week, and you buy one from him for 2 cents, because you have not eaten since noon and the potato is warm and your hands are cold. You eat it as you walk. The city is different at this hour. It has a different quality of sound, a different weight in the air. You have walked these streets in every season for 11 years, and you know this city the way you know the White House, which is to say by its textures more than its surfaces. There is a church on your block whose bell rings at 6 in the morning. You have not needed a clock alarm for years. You reach your building. You climb the 2 flights to your room. The room is small. A bed, a chair, a table, a window that faces east. On the table, your Bible, the book of household accounts you keep in your own hand, and a letter from your sister that arrived on Tuesday that you have read 3 times and will read again before you sleep. You sit on the edge of the bed. You are 34 years old, and you have been on your feet since before 4 this morning. You read your sister's letter. She writes that your mother has been having trouble with her left knee. She writes that the church is planning a revival in June. She writes that Thomas, her eldest, has started school, which is a thing she says in a way that is not saying it plainly but is saying it anyway. He is going to school. He is going to school. Remember that we are the people whose children now go to school. You fold the letter. You fold it precisely, because you fold everything precisely, because your hands do not know another way. You put out the lamp. You lie down in your clothes for a moment, just for a moment, to let the weight out of your legs. The church bell is a long way off. The city makes its night sounds around you. Tomorrow, the flowers will arrive at 7. You will be there. You are always there. You close your eyes. The day goes out of you like heat going out of a room, slowly, and then all at once. It is early July now, and the heat in Washington is the kind of heat that sits on you, that adds itself to everything you are already carrying and presses down. You are awake before 4. This has been true for as long as you can remember. This waking before the alarm, before the bell, before the light. Your body has simply decided that 4 is when the day begins, and you have not argued with it in years. You dress in the dark, shirtwaist, skirt, apron over both. Your shoes are by the door where you left them. You put them on without sitting. You know how to do this. Outside, the city is already warm. July in Washington is not a surprise to anyone who has lived here. The heat comes up off the brick and the stone, off the bare dirt roads, off the river a half-mile away, and it settles into everything. By midday it will be almost 100 degrees. By the time the evening diplomatic reception is over, close to midnight, the second floor of the White House will hold the day's heat like a closed jar. You walk quickly. There is always more to do than there is time to do it. The White House at 4:30 is the quietest it will be all day. The night guard is still making his rounds. The kitchen fire is being set by the cook's assistant, a young man named Henry, who has been here 4 months and is still learning the proper order of things. You can hear him rattling the grate as you come through the service entrance. You hang your coat. You check the linen room first. Today's formal luncheon requires the cream-colored damask, which is already pressed and folded in the second shelf from the top. You count the pieces, 12 covers, which means 12 napkins, 12 bread plates, 12 salad plates, plus the centerpiece cloth and the 2 serving cloths for the sideboard. Everything accounted for. On Saturdays, you do the full silver count. You do this alone. You have done it alone since the woman who trained you in this task retired 3 years ago. You take each piece from the velvet-lined drawer, check it against the inventory list that you have memorized but still consult, because the list is what matters, not your memory. And you note any piece that shows tarnish or surface scratching. The fish forks are fine. 3 of the tablespoons have small dark patches at the bowl that need attention. You set them aside. You will come back to these. The family is not yet awake. It is not your job to be in the family rooms at this hour, but you know the sounds of the house well enough to know who has stirred and who has not, and this morning the second floor is still. The president has been unwell. Not gravely, but there is something. You have been watching it for 2 weeks, the small signs that add up to a picture. The way he favors his right side when he stands up from a chair, the slight change in his color in the afternoons, the way he holds his coffee cup with both hands now, which he did not do in March. You have said nothing. It is not your place to say anything. But you have made sure that the morning trays are heavier, that there are more of the things he reaches for and less of the things he leaves, and you have made sure that his chair in the sitting room is slightly closer to the fire than it used to be, just slightly, just enough. He has not noticed. They rarely notice. They are very good at other things. You go down to the kitchen. Henry has the range going now, and the smell of coal smoke and hot iron fills the lower floor. The head cook, Mrs. Walsh, arrives at 5 and begins without greeting anyone, which is her custom and her right. She has been cooking in this house for 7 years, and she commands the kitchen with the authority of someone who has made peace with the fact that authority is the only thing between her and chaos on a dinner service night. You take your breakfast standing at the kitchen work table. A piece of bread with butter, a cup of coffee that is too hot to drink quickly. You drink it anyway. Today is Friday, July 1st, 1881. In 2 days, the president will take a train from the Baltimore and Potomac station on the Mall. You do not know this yet. You are thinking about the silver spoons. The silver is sterling from the Gorham Company in Providence, the same service that was ordered under the Grant administration for a cost of several $1,000s, which is an amount of money that means nothing to you because it is not a number that exists in your world. What exists in your world is that the spoons need to be right by 11 o'clock, when the luncheon table will be set. You take the 3 tarnished spoons and the polishing cloth, and you sit at the kitchen table. The polishing paste is made from cream of tartar and a small amount of chalk and water. You make a small amount fresh each time, because the prepared paste is not as reliable, and reliability is the only thing. You begin with the first spoon. The motion is circular, steady. You can do this in your sleep, and you nearly have on the long mornings of the social season when the nights ran short and the days ran long and the whole machine of the house just kept moving regardless. The tarnish comes off in small, dark smears on the cloth. The silver underneath is bright and exact. You check it against the light. No streaks. You turn it over. The Gorham stamp is on the back, clear as it was the day the spoon was made. You set it face down on the cloth. You start the second. There is a quality to this kind of work that you have come to value over the years, a quality of being entirely inside a task. There is nothing to think about while polishing silver except the silver. There is nothing to calculate or anticipate or manage. There is only the small circle, the cloth, the metal coming right under your hand. It is a few minutes of something like rest. The kitchen fills around you as the morning staff arrives. Mrs. Walsh gives orders in her rapid, low voice. Henry is sent to the market for parsley. The pastry cook arrives and goes immediately to the cold larder without speaking to anyone. The scullery maid begins the washing up from last night, the clatter of it absorbed into the general noise of a morning kitchen. You finish the second spoon. You start the third. The heat is already building outside. You can feel it through the kitchen wall. Today will be long. They are all long now, in July. But the luncheon will be set by 11, and the silver will be right, and the linen will be right, and the flowers that arrived this morning from the greenhouse will be arranged correctly in the appropriate vessels. You know this because you will make it so. You set the third spoon down. All 3 are bright now, ready. You take them upstairs to the dining room and set them in their places. The table is half laid. You finish it. You do not hurry. Hurrying makes mistakes. You go back over every piece once you have finished laying the table, starting from the foot and working toward the head. You move each fork slightly, checking the alignment. The fold of each napkin is the same fold. 4 precise squares, upright in the water glass, the monogram facing out. You step back. The table is ready. In the room above your head, the president is beginning to move about his morning. You pick up your basket and go. There is the rest of the house to do. There is always the rest of the house. Outside the window, at the end of the service corridor, Washington is fully awake now. You can hear it, the carters and the tradesmen, the distant shout of someone on the avenue, the irregular rhythm of a city going about its business in the press of summer heat. Somewhere in this city, a man named Charles Guiteau is also awake. You do not know his name. You are thinking about the napkins. One of them has a thread pulling at the edge of the fold. You will repress it before service. You go to get the iron. The day proceeds around you, steady and exact, and you proceed inside it, and the house works the way it is supposed to work, and the table is laid correctly, and the silver does not have a single spot. You make sure of it. The morning of July 2nd is the same as the morning before it and the morning before that. You are awake before 4. You walk to the White House in the building heat. You check the linen room. The president leaves the house at 9:30. He is going to the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad station. He is in good spirits. You do not see him leave. You are on the second floor, remaking a guest bed, when you hear the first sound of something wrong moving through the house below you. Not a shout, not an alarm. Something quieter than that, which is in some ways more alarming. A change in the quality of the air, a shift in the speed at which people are moving. You pause with the sheet in your hands. You listen. You go to the top of the stairs. Down in the front hall, 2 of the ushers are speaking in rapid, low voices over a piece of paper, and one of them looks up and sees you standing there, and his face tells you everything before his mouth opens. The president has been shot. At the railroad station on the mall. They are bringing him back here. You stand on the stairs for 3 more seconds. Then you go back to the bedroom and finish making the bed. You do this because it needs to be done. You do this because doing the thing in front of you is the only way you know how to be in a moment that has no map. You smooth the sheet. You fold the top. You pull the coverlet straight. Your hands do not shake. You go to find out what the house needs. The house will need a great deal. It always does in the hours that follow something like this. You are already moving. The president is carried back into the house at 11:30. You are not in the front hall when they bring him in. You are on the second floor, at the end of the corridor near the library, and what you hear first is the unusual sound of many feet moving together, the kind of coordinated movement that does not happen in this house except under circumstances outside the ordinary. Then the voices, the doctor's voice above the others, giving instructions. Then a sound that is not quite a word, that is a man's sound made involuntarily, a sound you recognize from the hospital you worked at briefly in 1869 after your first winter in Washington, when the money ran thin, a sound that means pain that cannot quite be held down. You press yourself to the wall as the procession passes below. You can see through the stairwell banister. There are 6 men helping to carry him, or rather to support him, because he is partly upright, and his face is the color of unbleached cotton, and there is blood, not as much as you might expect, but enough. They take him to his room. The doctors arrive in the next hour. 3, then 4, then more. The hallway outside the president's bedroom becomes a staging area. Men in coats carrying bags, speaking in the clipped shorthand of medicine, going in and coming out with their faces arranged in the professional neutrality that is its own kind of information. You move. You are the one who brings clean linen. You are the one who carries warm water in a basin and removes the basin when it is no longer wanted. You are the one who anticipates before you are asked and who does not linger after. In the next weeks, you will change his bed linens 43 times. You will count them. You will not mean to count them, but you will. This is the 3rd president you have worked under in this house. In your first year, Grant was here, a quiet man in private, more complicated in his stillness than his public appearances suggested. He spent long evenings in the small library on the 2nd floor, and you would find him there when you came to change the lamps, and he would nod at you without speaking and go back to whatever he was reading. He was not unkind. He was simply not present in the way that some people are not present even when they are in the room. Hayes was a different kind of man, more formal, more deliberate, with a quality of intention about everything he did, as though he had decided in advance how each situation would be handled and was simply executing the decision. His wife Lucy ran the house with a steady hand, and the effect of her steadiness was that the house ran steadily, and you had liked that, the predictability of it, the way each day had a shape you could work inside. Garfield you had not yet had time to know properly. Now the knowing was happening on terms that were not yours to choose. You bring a fresh basin of water to the outside of the room. One of the younger doctors takes it from you without looking up from the chart he is reading. You go back for more linen. The house is running on a different frequency now. Everyone is moving faster and speaking less, and the ordinary daily tasks are still being done because they must be done. The meals must be prepared. The other rooms must be kept. The family members who are not in the president's room must still have their needs attended to. And so the machine of the house keeps going, but differently, on a different fuel. You have been in this house through exactly one death. A child, 2nd year of the Grant administration, a nephew visiting for a summer month who took a fever and did not recover from it, and the family's grief moving through the house like weather, changing the pressure of everything. That was different from this. This is a different kind of waiting. Garfield lives through July and into August. The wound itself is not immediately fatal. It is a single bullet entering the back, and it passes through tissue without striking the spine, and there is a period in those first days where the doctors believe he may survive. But the doctors probe the wound. They use their fingers. They use metal instruments. This is standard medical practice in 1881. The germ theory of disease is understood by some physicians and disputed by others, and antiseptic practice in American hospitals is not yet what it will become, and the instruments are not sterilized in the way that sterilization will come to mean in 20 years. You do not know this is happening in precisely these terms. What you know is that he gets worse. What you know is that the wound that was manageable becomes something that is not manageable. What you know is that by mid-August, the smell of the sick room has changed. You know what that smell means. You have known what it means since 1869. You continue to bring linen. You continue to bring water. You are as efficient and as quiet as you have ever been, and you make no sign of what you know, because making a sign serves no one in this situation, and there are enough people in that house whose grief is already showing on their faces without you adding to the general weight. Mrs. Garfield is there through all of it. She is a small woman with steady eyes, and she has a quality that you come to recognize over those weeks as the quality of someone who has decided to be equal to whatever happens. She does not crumble. She does not withdraw. She moves through those rooms every day as though the day can still be met on its own terms, which is a kind of courage that does not get named as courage because it wears the costume of ordinary function. You understand this kind of courage from the inside. In late August, the decision is made to move the president to a cottage in Elberon, New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore, where the sea air is believed to offer better conditions for recovery. You are not in the room where this decision is made. You hear about it from the head usher. There is a significant engineering operation undertaken to move him. A special track is laid by railroad workers so that the president's car can reach the cottage without jarring. 8,000 people work through the night to lay the track across soft ground. This is reported in the newspapers that arrive in the kitchen every morning, and that you read in the first 10 minutes of your workday while the coffee is coming to heat. 8,000 people through one night to move a man gently. You think about this. You press a sheet on the mangle and you think about this. The president leaves the house on September 6th. He will die at Elberon on September 19th. On that morning, a Saturday, you are at work. You hear the news at midday. You are in the linen room, which is where you often are when news reaches you, because the linen room is between the kitchen and the back stairs, and it is the natural channel through which information moves in this house. You hear it. You stand still for a moment. Then you go back to counting the pillowcases. 14, 15. You have work to do. Chester Arthur will be president now. He will want the house redecorated. He will bring in Louis Comfort Tiffany. He will have 24 wagon loads of existing furnishings removed and sold at public auction. He will not know that you straightened the painting in the hall 412 times. You will still straighten it. Some things do not change because the family changes. You set the pillowcases in their stack. 16, 17, 18. The house is quiet. It is always quiet after. Before the next family comes, there will be 3 hours when the house holds its breath, and you will remake every room. You are already thinking about which sheets need replacing. You are already thinking about what the new family will require. This is what you do. This is what you have always done. The house goes on, and so do you. Chester Arthur arrives on a Thursday in late September of 1881, And the first thing he does is stand in the center of the blue room and look at the walls for a long time without speaking. You are not in the blue room. You are in the corridor outside it, and you can see him through the open door, a large man in a well-cut coat, standing with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at the wallpaper with an expression that tells you everything you need to know about what is coming. He does not like what he sees. Chester Arthur is 51 years old, and he has arrived at the presidency by one of the more abrupt routes available. He was the vice president, which in the ordinary course of things is not a position that leads anywhere quickly. And then the president was shot, and then the president lingered for 11 weeks, and then the president died. And now Chester Arthur is here, in this house, looking at the blue room wallpaper with a particular quality of dissatisfaction that you have learned, in your years in this place, to read very precisely. He will want changes. You already know this. He has a reputation which arrived before him in the form of newspaper commentary read in the kitchen over morning coffee. Chester Arthur is known in New York City as a man of conspicuous taste. He keeps an excellent table. His suits are said to be the finest in the city, and he is reported to own more than 80 of them. He is a man who cares deeply about the appearance of things, and the appearance of this house, as it currently stands, does not meet his standard. You have worked in this house through 3 full administrations. You understand that each new family brings a different appetite for change. Grant wanted comfort, which mostly meant leaving things as they were. Hayes wanted order, which mostly meant tightening what already existed. Arthur wants renovation. This is a different kind of wanting. Within 6 weeks of his arrival, the decision is announced. The White House is to be thoroughly renovated and redecorated, and the project will be overseen by Louis Comfort Tiffany of New York, who is 23 years old and already known for his work in stained glass and interior design, and who arrives at the house in late October with a sketchbook and an air of absolute certainty about his own vision. You carry a tray past him on his first day. He does not look up from his sketchbook. You note this. You note everything. The renovation requires the existing furnishings to be removed. In February of 1882, 24 wagon loads of furniture, carpets, curtains, and miscellaneous household items are hauled out of the White House and sold at public auction on the street. This is reported in every newspaper in Washington, and people line the blocks to watch it happen. A rocking chair that belonged to Lincoln goes for 35 cents. Crockery from the Monroe administration sells for a few dollars per piece to the crowds who have gathered as though it is a fair. You are working inside the house while the wagons are being loaded. You do not go out to watch. You are taking inventory of the linen room, which has been left entirely to you to manage through the upheaval, because the renovation does not touch the service areas in the same way, and because the domestic routine of the house must continue regardless of what is happening to the walls and floors above. Meals must be prepared, beds must be changed, water must be brought up, and waste must be carried down. A house does not stop being a house because someone is repainting it. Your count: 126 sheets, 48 pillowcases, 39 towels of various grades, 6 sets of the state guest room covers. You have added 2 sets since the Garfield year. The old ones were worn past use, and you submitted the replacement request in November. and it was approved in January, and the new ones arrived from New York, packed in brown paper and tissue, and you unwrapped them yourself and put them in their place on the second shelf, and that was the end of it. This is what your work looks like. It does not look like anything. That is the point of it. The Tiffany renovation takes most of the winter and into the spring. The most famous element is the opalescent glass screen installed in the entrance hall, a floor-to-ceiling construction of colored glass tiles in red, white, and blue, filtering the light from the north entrance into something that looks, depending on the angle and the time of day, like the interior of a church or the bottom of a lake. It is 12 feet tall, and it is unlike anything that has been in this house before. You clean around it. You learn its edges, the corners where dust accumulates despite the height. It must be approached with a soft cloth rather than anything stiff. The colored glass is more fragile than it appears from a distance and must be treated accordingly. You do not touch it unless you have to. When you do have to, you are careful. Tiffany is also responsible for the new color scheme throughout. Deep burgundy in the East Room, forest green in the family sitting room, a rich gold in the dining room that catches the gaslight in the evenings and throws a warmth across the table that the previous pale yellow never managed. The new carpets are thick enough that your footsteps disappear entirely on the family floor, which is useful and which Arthur seems to appreciate without ever saying so directly. He appreciates a great deal without saying so directly. Arthur is a formal man in the old sense, meaning he has a quality of reserve that is not coldness but distance, a distance that functions as a kind of dignity. He lost his wife the year before he became president. She died in January of 1880, 4 years younger than him, and he has been in mourning since, a quiet mourning that does not display itself but that you can feel in the house the same way you can feel a change in weather before the clouds arrive. He has fresh flowers sent to his wife's portrait each morning. This is not publicly known. This is something you know because you are the one who passes the portrait on your way to the family rooms each day, and the flowers are always fresh, and someone must be arranging them. You arrange them. Nobody asked you to. You started doing it in January of 1882, about 3 months after he arrived, when you noticed the flowers in the hall vase going dry for the second day in a row, and took them down and replaced them without ceremony and put the old ones out with the kitchen waste. He never said anything. You never said anything. This continued for 3 years. Arthur's household runs on a different schedule than its predecessors. He keeps late hours, a habit from his New York social life, and he is frequently not at dinner until 9 or 10 in the evening, which means the kitchen works later and the domestic staff on the family floor stays later, and the whole rhythm of the house shifts toward the night. He hosts often, and he hosts well, with menus designed to impress, and a standard of table service that matches the elevated reputation of his interior renovations. You have set the formal dining table for every state dinner under this administration for 4 years. Under Arthur, you set it for dinners of 30 and 40 covers, with multiple removes, with the full Haviland china, with the Gorham silver in complete sets, with crystal from the new service he ordered in the fall of 1882. You lay each cover at exactly 24 inches from its neighbor, measured by eye now, not by the string you used in your first year. You fold the napkins in a shape that requires 9 steps done in a fixed sequence, and the result stands upright in the water glass and catches the light in a way that the head steward has noted twice in your presence as correct, which is as close to praise as this job regularly offers. Correct is what you are. Correct is what you have made yourself. The dining room under the new Tiffany gold walls and the refurbished gas chandelier, 16 arms, each fitted with a frosted globe, looks on a formal evening like something from another century. The light is warm and even, and the table is set correctly, and the silver holds no spots. And when you stand in the doorway before the guests come in, you allow yourself briefly to look at it. It is right. You made it right. You go back to the kitchen. There is always something that needs doing before the guests arrive. In the spring of 1887, you turn 40 years old. You mark this in the small account book you keep on the table in your room, writing the date and the number and nothing else. 40 is a number you have been moving toward for a long time, and now you are here. And the house is still the same house, and the work is still the same work, and you are still the one doing it. Your wage is now $14 per month. It was 12 for 13 years. The raise came in 1883, during the Arthur administration, initiated by the head steward who submitted the paperwork on behalf of the senior domestic staff. You did not ask for it. You were not consulted. 1 month the wage was different, and you counted it twice to be sure, and then you wrote the new amount in your book, and that was that. $14. You send $5 to your mother now. Her knee has worsened. She does not leave the house in Culpeper anymore, and your sister manages the household with help from Thomas, who is now 16 and working at a printer's shop and sending home money of his own. You think about Thomas often. You think about the fact that he is 16 and working at a printer's shop and can read and write and has never been owned. This is not a small thing. You carry coal up the back stairs and you think about this. The bucket is heavy, close to 22 pounds when full, because the Tiffany renovation required larger fireplace surrounds in the family rooms, and the larger grates require more fuel. Your shoulders are strong from this. The muscles of your back and arms have a quality of permanence to them, as though they have been carved into their current shape by years of this specific labor, which they have. You set the bucket down at the top of the stairs. You breathe. You pick it up again. There is a morning in November of 1884 when Arthur calls you by name for the first time. You are passing the open door of the library, where he is sitting with a cup of coffee and a newspaper, and he speaks without looking up. "Ida," he says, "the fire in this room wants attention." You say, "Yes, sir." You come in and attend to the fire. He does not look up from his paper. You go. In the corridor afterward, you stand for a moment. In 4 years, this is the first time he has used your name directly. You do not know what to do with this, so you do nothing with it. You go to check the linen room. The inventory is as it should be. In March of 1885, the Arthur family packs their things and leaves. You do not watch them go, but you hear the carriages. You are already thinking about the 3 hours. Grover Cleveland is inaugurated on March 4th, 1885, and he arrives at the house that afternoon, and the 3 hours between families passes the way it always passes, in silence, in motion, in the particular labor of erasing one life and preparing for the next. Cleveland is 47 years old, and he is the first Democrat to hold the presidency since before the war, which means his arrival carries a weight of political history that settles over the House like a change in barometric pressure. You cannot point to it exactly, but you feel it in the way the staff moves in those first days, a slight additional tension, a quality of adjustment. He arrives as a bachelor. This is unusual. In the 15 years you have worked in this house, there has always been a first lady or a close female equivalent managing the household arrangements. The absence of this is immediately practical. It means the domestic coordination that normally flows through the first lady's office now flows differently, and you adjust to the new channel without being asked to. Cleveland is a large man, broader than Garfield and taller than Arthur, with a mustache and the blunt quality of someone who has not made a habit of worrying about what others think of him. He eats well, or rather he eats a great deal, and his preferences are straightforward: meat, potatoes, substantial food served at a reasonable hour without ceremony. This is a different table from Arthur's. You adjust the tablecloth for fewer covers. You put away the most elaborate pieces of the crystal service. The formal dinners still happen. They must happen. But the in-between meals, the private meals, are plainer, and the house settles into this new register without difficulty. What is harder to adjust to is the pace. Cleveland works at a pace that is different from any of his predecessors, staying in his office until late at night, handling his own correspondence in a way that no president since Lincoln has done, refusing the delegation of paperwork, as though the paperwork is the only honest part of the job. The lights in the executive offices burn past midnight regularly, and the house staff who cover the late shift learn to move quietly around the south end of the second floor without being told to. You already know how to move quietly. You have been moving quietly in this house for 15 years. In June of 1886, Cleveland marries. His wife is Frances Folsom, who is 21 years old, which makes her 26 years younger than her husband and the youngest first lady in the history of the house. She arrives with her mother and with a quality of composure that seems remarkable for her age. And within 2 weeks it becomes clear that her composure is not performed but actual, which is considerably rarer. Frances Cleveland is 21 years old, and she manages the White House household with a deliberateness that impresses you. You do not impress easily. She learns the names of the domestic staff within the first week, which Mrs. Hayes had also done, but which is not a given in this position. She asks questions directly and listens to the answers, and when she disagrees with an arrangement, she says so plainly without making it an occasion for any additional display. She is neither warm nor cold. She is present in a manner that the most useful people share, fully, without excess. She has opinions about flowers. You discover this on the third day of her residence, when you come to arrange the centerpiece for the family dining room and find a note written in a small, precise hand, detailing exactly which flowers she does not want in the arrangements: carnations, which she finds heavy; orange dahlias, which she finds agitating; and any arrangement that rises above the sight line of the diners, which she finds an obstruction. You read this note twice. You note that she has not said what she wants, only what she does not want. You consider this. You arrange the centerpiece with white roses, low cut, with fern backing, and a few stems of something pale and feathery, whose name in Latin you do not know, but whose name in the greenhouse catalog is feverfew. She does not comment. The following week, the note is gone and is not replaced. You take this as approval. This is how you have always worked, by reading the absence of complaint as the only form of praise available and proceeding accordingly. The Cleveland years are steady years. There is no shooting, no death, no prolonged illness, no renovation. The house runs, the meals are prepared. The linen is laundered and pressed and counted. The silver is polished on Saturdays. The fires are set and banked and set again. The floors are swept and mopped and swept again. The lamps are trimmed and filled and trimmed again. You have been doing this for 15 years. Your hands know the work so completely that you can do most of it without deliberate thought. And this leaves a part of your mind free to move through other things while your hands are occupied. You think about your mother, who is 70 now or close to it, and whose knee has not improved, and whose letters arrive in your sister's handwriting because her own handwriting has become unsteady. You think about Thomas, who has left the printer's shop and found work at a newspaper in Richmond, Virginia, setting type for the Richmond Planet, which is a black-owned paper that publishes news of the Negro community and that is not timid about what it publishes. You read it when copies come through Washington. It says things that other papers will not say. You believe in saying true things. You think about this house, which you know better now than you have ever known it. Which is to say, you know it the way you know a person you have lived alongside for a very long time. Not just what it looks like, but how it sounds and how it smells and what it does under pressure. Under pressure it holds. That is what old houses do. You are holding a set of freshly pressed napkins and walking the length of the second-floor corridor when you hear, from behind the closed door of the family sitting room, Frances Cleveland's voice raised to a pitch you have not heard from her before. Not anger. Something more compressed than anger. You do not slow down. You carry the napkins to the linen room. You put them in their place. You do not speculate about what you heard, because speculation is a luxury with consequences in this building, and you have learned to forgo it the same way you have learned to forgo other small things that cost more than they are worth. The door opens and closes. The corridor is quiet. You go back to the kitchen. You have been here long enough to understand that the private life of this family, like every family before them, is none of your business and all of your concern. Those two things can be true at the same time. You learned this in your first year. You have been practicing it ever since. In the winter of 1887, you begin to notice something in your left knee. Not pain exactly, a quality of resistance, as though the joint is considering the question of each stair before agreeing to it. It does not slow you down. You do not let it slow you down. But you notice it the way you notice any change in the equipment you depend on, which is with attention and without alarm. You are 40 years old. You have been carrying coal up these stairs for 15 years. You carry coal up the stairs. The knee considers the question. You proceed. The boiler, which has been a recurring problem since the Grant years, fails again in February of 1888. It fails on a Thursday, which is the day of a scheduled family dinner for 16, and it fails in the morning, which gives you the full day to work around it. You have worked around boiler failures before. You bring the portable braziers up from the storage area in the basement, 2 of them, and position them in the hallways of the second floor where they will do the most good. You advise the kitchen to prepare dishes that will hold heat, the braised things, the heavy sauces, the foods that do not punish delay the way fish punishes delay. You send a message to the engineer who is already aware of the situation and deeply unhappy about it. The dinner proceeds. 16 covers. The food arrives at the table at the right temperature. Nobody mentions the cold. You made sure of that. This is the invisible skill, the one that has no name in any ledger, the skill of managing the gap between what is and what should be, of taking a broken situation and returning it to function without anyone having to know there was a problem. You have this skill. You have had it for years. You do not know where it came from exactly, whether it was something Mrs. Hemings taught you in the laundry room of the boarding house in 1869, or something you were born with, or something the house itself pressed into you over a decade and a half of daily necessity. It does not matter where it came from. It is yours. You stand in the service corridor after the last remove has been cleared and the guests are in the drawing room for their coffee, and you listen to the house. The boiler is still silent. The braziers are keeping the upstairs warm enough. The dinner was right. You go to check on the linen. There is always something that needs checking. In November of 1888, Grover Cleveland loses the presidential election to Benjamin Harrison, a result that surprises a number of people, but that has the specific quality of a thing that, in retrospect, makes complete sense. You read about it in the newspaper. You have been reading about American politics in the newspaper every morning for 15 years. Which has given you a very thorough understanding of how power moves in this country, whom it moves toward, whom it moves away from, how long it stays in one place before moving on. Power does not stay anywhere for very long. You have watched 4 presidencies from this corridor. The families come. The families go. You remain. Frances Cleveland, on her last day in the House, does something that no First Lady has done to you before in all your years here. She stops. She stops in the corridor, on her way to the carriage, with her coat on and her hat already in place, and she looks at you directly for a moment longer than is required by courtesy. She says, "You keep this house better than it knows." Then she walks on. You stand in the corridor. The carriage doors close outside. You have been told in 15 years that your work is satisfactory twice, that it is good once, and that a piece of silver was not properly dried on one occasion in 1879. You have never been told anything like this. You stand in the corridor for 30 seconds. Then you go to begin the 3 hours. The house needs remaking. The Harrisons are coming. You pick up your cloth. You begin at the top and you work your way down, the way you always do, room by room, surface by surface, starting from nothing and building it back to right. Your left knee is bothering you today. You do not stop. The house needs to be ready. You have never once left it not ready. You smooth the final sheet. You check the corners. You step back. The room is right. You move to the next one. Outside, Washington is going about its business in the gray November air. Inside, the house is quiet and clean and prepared. You have made it so. You will always make it so. That is what you are here for. That is what you have always been here for. You move down the corridor in the silence of the empty house, and the afternoon light comes through the end window at a low angle. And for a moment, the whole length of the hall is filled with a color that is almost gold, almost amber, the light of late autumn in a city that is neither north nor south, a city that has been building itself into something for as long as you have been living in it. 19 years in this corridor. 19 years of this light. You know every plank of this floor. You know which one creaks and which one does not. You walk the length of it. Your footsteps are quiet. They have always been quiet. You reach the end. You turn. The painting on the wall is crooked again. You straighten it. You hold your fingers against the frame for a moment, checking the level by feel, and then you lift your hand away, and it is right. It is always right when you leave it. It will be crooked again by morning. You will straighten it again. This is the work. Not the great events, not the history that gets written down. This, the painting, the light, the quiet corridor, the house held together by hands that no one records. Yours. The Harrisons arrive in March of 1889, and the house fills up in a way it has not filled up in years. Benjamin Harrison is 55 years old, a small, precise man from Indiana with white sideburns and a manner that is courteous and correct without being warm. The manner of someone who has decided that warmth is a kind of imprecision he cannot afford. He is the grandson of William Henry Harrison, who was president for 31 days in 1841 before dying of pneumonia, which is a piece of family history that sits in the background of everything about him, without ever quite being spoken of. You know about William Henry Harrison from the newspapers and from the institutional memory of this house, which is a thing you have been accumulating in layers for 16 years, and which tells you, among other things, that this family has a complicated relationship with this building. His wife, Caroline, is warm in the way that he is not, a quality of genuine curiosity about the people around her, and within the first week she has spoken to most of the domestic staff by name and asked after their families in a way that is not performance but interest. She is also, you discover within the first month, seriously interested in the house itself. Not in the way that Tiffany was interested, the aesthetic renovation, the theatrical transformation. Caroline Harrison is interested in the history of the place. She wants to know where things came from. She begins asking about the china. There are, in the White House china storage, pieces from nearly every administration going back to the beginning of the Republic, some of them in sets, some of them orphaned from their sets, all of them stacked in the lower cabinets of the service corridor without labels or any coherent system of organization. You know what is in those cabinets. You have been working around them for 16 years. Mrs. Harrison wants them inventoried. You do the inventory. It takes 3 days, spread across the early mornings before the household wakes, sitting cross-legged on the service corridor floor with each piece in your hands and your small notebook beside you, writing the description and the condition and the approximate period in your careful printed letters. Monroe Administration, deep blue and gold dessert plates, 17 of 17. Buchanan Administration, cream ground with a gold band and American eagle, 11 of 12, one with a hairline crack at the rim. Lincoln Administration, purple and gold, the pattern that was chosen by Mary Todd Lincoln from the Haviland Catalog in 1861 at a cost of $3,000 for the full service. 22 pieces remaining of the original 378. You wrap each piece back in its cloth. You stack them as they were. You submit the notebook to Mrs. Harrison through the head steward. You hear nothing back. A month later, Mrs. Harrison begins a project to have the china documented formally and displayed in a systematic way, and her name will eventually be associated with the establishment of the White House China Collection as a historical record. Your notebook is not credited. You did not expect it to be. The Harrison household has children and grandchildren in it, more than any family you have worked for since your first years in the house, and the effect of this is a particular quality of noise and motion that moves through the upper floors at unexpected hours. There is a grandson who is 4 years old and who runs the length of the second-floor hall at a speed that seems impossible for his size. There is a baby. There are dogs. There is at one point a goat, which belongs to the grandson and which finds its way into the kitchen garden twice before arrangements are made for its permanent relocation. You say nothing about the goat. This is not your domain, but you note it. The Harrison years are domestic years in the most literal sense, years in which the private life of the family is louder and more present than it was under the previous administration. You are, more often than not, the one who moves through the wake of it, the toys left in the hallway, the dishes that need clearing at hours outside the normal schedule, the fires that burn lower than they should because someone was in the room until late and the coal was not replenished. You replenish the coal. You clear the hallway. You keep the schedule. Caroline Harrison, in addition to her interest in the china, is interested in renovating the house. There is a plan proposed in 1889 to expand the building significantly, adding new wings on both sides to create a proper separation between the executive offices and the family living quarters. Architects are consulted, plans are drawn. The project does not move forward, partly because Congress will not authorize the expenditure, and partly because the house itself resists the imposition of new shapes upon it, which is a thing you have come to believe after almost 2 decades inside it. This house has a quality of completion about it. Not perfection. It is not perfect. The boiler is still unreliable. The upper floors are cold in December, in ways that no amount of coal can entirely address. There are rooms that have never been entirely right and probably never will be. But it is complete. It knows what it is. New wings would change something fundamental about it, and that change would not only be architectural. You are not asked your opinion, but you have it. The renovation does not happen. What does happen in 1891 is that Caroline Harrison begins to show signs of illness. You notice before it is announced. You notice her face has changed in its color, the specific gray that underlies it now in the mornings. You notice that she is eating less, that the trays come back with more on them than they should. You notice her moving through the upper floor rooms more slowly, pausing at the window at the end of the hall more often, looking out at the south lawn with an expression that is not sad exactly, but distant. You have seen this before. You say nothing. You make sure the morning tray is lighter and contains things that are easy to eat. You make sure the fire in her sitting room runs a little warmer than the setting requires. You make sure there is always fresh water in her room and that it is changed more frequently than the schedule calls for, because a fresh glass of cold water is a small thing, and a small thing is all you have to offer. She is diagnosed with tuberculosis in the fall of 1891. She spends most of 1892 unable to leave the upstairs rooms. You change her linen every day through that year. Not twice a week. Every day. This is your decision. No one asks you to do it. No one tells you not to. It is simply the right thing, and you do it. The extra load added to your daily work without mention or acknowledgement, the same way you have added extra loads to your daily work for 20 years without mention or acknowledgement. Caroline Harrison dies on October 25, 1892, in the White House, 2 weeks before the presidential election. She is 60 years old. You are in the building when it happens. You hear the change move through the house the way you always hear these things, not as a single sound, but as a shift in the texture of the air, a change in the speed at which people move, a door closing somewhere that opens a silence wider than a door. You are in the linen room. You continue your count. 14, 15, 16. Harrison loses the election to Cleveland in November. Cleveland, who was here before. Cleveland, whom you already know. There are former presidents who come back to this house. There are not, in the ordinary course of things, former housekeepers who are still here when they do. But you are still here. You are 45 years old, and your left knee is a consistent concern now, and your eyes have been requiring more light for the detail work for about 2 years. But you are still here, still moving through this house in your quiet way, still doing the work that has no record. In March of 1893, the 3 hours come again. You remake the house. You strip every room. You put clean sheets on every bed. You replace every piece of linen that shows the wear of the Harrison years. You put fresh flowers in the correct vases. You check the Tiffany glass screen in the entrance hall, which has developed a small crack at the lower left corner that you reported 3 months ago and that has not yet been repaired, and that you check again now, running one finger along the crack without touching the colored glass itself. It is the same as it was. You note it. The crack will be repaired eventually. Things here are always repaired eventually. You stand in the entrance hall and look at the glass screen that Tiffany built in 1882. The colors of it in the afternoon light, red and white and blue arranged in a pattern that is almost but not quite symmetrical, which is one of the things about it that makes it beautiful, the slight irregularity that keeps it from being merely decorative. You have cleaned around this screen for 11 years. You know its edges and its corners and the way the light moves through it at different hours. There are not many people who know this building the way you know it. There are, in fact, none. The Clevelands arrive. Frances Cleveland, who said to you, "You keep this house better than it knows." She walks through the door of the north entrance with her children beside her, the children she did not have when she left 4 years ago, and she looks at the entrance hall, and she looks at the glass screen, and then she looks at you, standing at the end of the hall, with your hands folded, and she nods once. You nod back. That is all. It is enough. You know each other. That is a thing this house can give, occasionally, in the years of its accumulation. The recognition between two people who have each, in their different ways, taken the measure of the place and not looked away. She goes upstairs to see the rooms. You go to the kitchen to check on the dinner preparations. The second Cleveland administration is beginning. You have been here since before it was a dream in anyone's mind. You will be here when it ends. That is not pride exactly. It is something quieter than pride. Something more like the feeling of a floor plank under your foot that is never given, not once, in 20 years of crossing. Solid. Still there. You. The second Cleveland administration ends in March of 1897, and William McKinley arrives with an invalid wife and a quality of steadiness that is either genuine or very well rehearsed, and that you, after 27 years in this house, are still not entirely certain which. McKinley's wife, Ida, is epileptic. This is not publicly discussed. It is managed, which is a different thing, and the management of it falls partly on the domestic staff in the unspoken way that things fall on domestic staff, not through instruction, but through the gradual accumulation of understanding about what the household needs and why. Ida McKinley needs her surroundings stable. She needs noise controlled. She needs the household to run on a schedule she can anticipate, because unpredictability is one of the things that can precipitate a seizure, and a seizure in this house, in front of the kind of visitors who move through it, is something that the president wants to prevent. Not out of shame exactly, but out of the specific protectiveness of a man who has watched his wife suffer for years and has learned to construct a life around her needs so carefully that the construction becomes invisible. You understand this kind of construction. You have been constructing invisible frameworks your entire working life. You adjust the household schedule for the McKinley years without being asked to adjust it. You speak to the kitchen about timing. You speak to the footman about the approach to the family rooms. You make the kind of small structural changes that produce large effects downstream, and that nobody traces back to their origin because the whole point of them is that they do not call attention to themselves. The president notices once. He does not say anything directly. But he looks at you in the corridor one evening as you are coming off the family floor, and there is something in that look that is neither thanks nor acknowledgement, but is something between the two, a recognition of the thing that is happening without naming the thing, which is the only way such things get acknowledged in this house. You carry the tray. You go downstairs. You are 50 years old, and you have been doing this for 27 years, and you are very, very good at it. In September of 1901, McKinley is shot at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. He is shot on September 6th, and he dies 8 days later, on September 14th. You have now been in this house through 2 presidential assassinations, or near assassinations, in the case of Garfield, who lived 11 weeks. You count this in the small accounting book that you keep, not as a morbid record, but because accuracy matters to you, and this is part of the accurate record of your years here. The things you have been present for, the weight of the institutional memory you carry. The weight is considerable. Theodore Roosevelt is 42 years old when he becomes president, the youngest man ever to hold the office, and his arrival in the White House is less an arrival than a collision. He is a force of physical and intellectual energy that moves through rooms like a weather system, leaving everything in its wake slightly rearranged. He has 6 children, 5 of whom are at various stages between infant and young adult, and the effect of 6 Roosevelt children in this house is something you have to experience to understand. There are roller skates on the 2nd floor. There is, on one occasion that you will not forget, a small pony in the elevator, brought in by the youngest boy as a surprise for his brother who is sick in bed upstairs. You learn about the pony after the fact from Henry, who is no longer the new cook's assistant, but is now the 2nd cook, and who has been in this house for 20 years himself, and who tells you about the pony with the expression of a man who has accepted that his working life will continue to produce experiences for which no training could have prepared him. You do not laugh. You wait until you are in the linen room. Then you allow yourself something very close to it. The Roosevelt household is the most demanding household you have worked for in the physical sense. More meals, more movement, more wear on everything. The linen inventory requires updating twice in the first year, a thing that has never happened before. The kitchen is on a different footing entirely, running at a pace that Mrs. Walsh, who is retired by now, would have found alarming, and that her replacement, a man named George who trained at a hotel in New York, navigates with professional equanimity. The house adapts. It always adapts. You adapt with it. In October of 1901, 1 month after Roosevelt takes office, a dinner invitation is sent to Booker T. Washington. You know who Booker T. Washington is. You have been reading newspapers in this kitchen for 30 years, and you have been reading the Negro press for just as long. The Planet, the Bee, the Washington Colored American, and in those papers Booker T. Washington has been a constant and debated presence for a decade, a man whose name carries with it a whole architecture of argument about what Black Americans should want and how they should ask for it and what they should be willing to accept in exchange for safety. You have your own views about this architecture. You do not share them at work. On October 16, 1901, Booker T. Washington dines with Theodore Roosevelt and his family at the White House. It is a private dinner, not a state dinner, a family dinner, the kind that happens at the table in the family dining room rather than the formal room, with the family silver and the family china, and without the elaborate apparatus of a state occasion. You set the table. You have set this table hundreds of times. Tonight is different, and you know it is different while you are doing it, while you are laying the covers and counting the places, though the physical act is the same act it always is. 24 inches between settings, napkins folded in their 9 steps, water glasses at the tip of the knife. You set the place for Booker T. Washington with the same hands and the same precision and the same standard you bring to every cover you have ever laid at this table. This is what you can do. This is what you do. You are not in the room during the dinner. You are never in the room during dinner unless you are needed. But you hear the sounds of it from the service corridor, voices, the clink of silver on china, at one point what might be laughter. The dinner lasts approximately 2 hours. Washington leaves. You come in to clear. The table is as tables are after dinner, used, marked with the evidence of the meal, the water glasses with their rings, the napkins unfolded across laps and left on chairs. You clear it the same way you clear every table, efficiently and without sentiment, stacking the plates in the precise order that makes the washing up easiest. The dinner is reported in the newspapers the next day. The reaction is immediate and violent and sustained. Southern newspapers print editorials that use language you have read before, but that still, after all these years, do not become ordinary from repetition. The words are designed to degrade, and they are deployed with deliberate precision, and they are directed not only at Washington and Roosevelt, but at the idea, the audacious and apparently intolerable idea, that a black man might sit at a table in this house as a guest rather than a servant. You read these editorials. You fold the newspaper. You go to work. This is what you have always done. But something in the house changes after October of 1901 and does not change back. It is not dramatic. There is no confrontation, no instruction, no policy. It is something more ambient than policy. A quality in the air, a slight adjustment in how certain people move through the building, a sharpening of attention toward the staff that was not there before, or that was there before but is more present now, as though the dinner has made something visible that everyone preferred to keep invisible. You are that something. You have always known you were that something. You have spent 30 years navigating a building in which you are necessary and unwelcome at the same time, in which your competence is required and your personhood is optional, in which you are seen when something goes wrong and invisible when everything goes right. This has not changed, but the charge on it has changed. You feel it in how some of the management staff look at you or do not look at you, in a door held open with a quality of not quite holding, in a conversation in the kitchen that stops when you enter, which is not new. The kitchen has always had its conversations that stop, but there is something different about this stopping, something that was not in it before October. You note it. You do not react to it. Reacting is a luxury. You have never had the margin for it. You carry your coal bucket up the back stairs. You carry it without changing your pace. Your left knee is a consistent problem now. You have been managing it for 6 years with a wrapping of flannel underneath your stocking on the cold days and with a quality of deliberate even weight distribution that you have worked out over time, shifting the load slightly to the right when the left protests, shifting back when the right begins to speak. You have not mentioned this to anyone. There is no one to mention it to in the sense that mentioning it would produce anything useful. You are 54 years old. Your back is strong. Your hands are strong. Your knees are negotiating. You proceed. Roosevelt is in this house for 7 years. And in those 7 years, you watch a country arguing with itself through the medium of this building the way you have watched it arguing with itself for 3 decades. The arguments are not new. The shapes of them are the same shapes they have always been, the same contests over who belongs here and on what terms, and who gets to decide. What changes is the volume. The volume in the Roosevelt years is considerable. He is a man who generates noise wherever he goes, not from carelessness, but from the specific energy of someone who believes that the world responds to force and who tests this belief continuously. His children fill the house with a physical vitality that is genuinely joyful and genuinely exhausting. His political opponents fill the newspapers with a quality of outrage that seems to you to have been waiting for an occasion and simply found one in October of 1901. You clean up after all of it. Literally. There is a state dinner in the winter of 1903 for 38 guests, the most elaborate table you have set in your time here, and you set it in 4 hours with 2 assistants, and when you step back from it before the guests arrive, it is correct in every particular, the kind of correct that is achieved only through long practice and through a standard so internalized that deviating from it would feel like speaking in the wrong language. The head steward walks the table. He does not say anything. He nods once and walks out. That nod contains 30 years of this house. You fold it up and carry it with you the same way you carry everything else, inward, where it joins the accumulated weight of a working life in a place that will never properly account for what you gave it. There is a morning in the spring of 1906 when Roosevelt stops you in the corridor on the 2nd floor. Not to speak to you exactly. He is on his way somewhere, the way he is always on his way somewhere, moving with that forward momentum that seems to require more than the normal amount of corridor space. And he slows for a moment as he passes you and says, without preamble, "How long have you been in this house?" You tell him. 36 years, you say. He stops entirely. He looks at you for a moment with the expression he uses when he encounters a fact that requires recalibration. Then he says, "Good God," and walks on. This is, in the accounting of your career, a significant moment. Not because of what was said. What was said was brief and unremarkable, but because of the arithmetic contained in it. 36 years. You had said the number aloud to another person for the first time, and hearing it come out of your own mouth and land in the air between you and the 26th President of the United States made it real in a way that it had not been entirely real before. 35 years. You count the presidents on your way downstairs. Grant, Hayes, Garfield, Arthur, Cleveland, Harrison, Cleveland, McKinley, Roosevelt. 9. 9 men. You have served them all. None of their administrations lasted as long as you have lasted. You go to check the linen room. Everything is as it should be. In the summer of 1902, Roosevelt oversees a major renovation of the White House. The renovation is undertaken by the architectural firm of McKim, Mead and White, the same firm responsible for the Pennsylvania station in New York, and it is the most thorough structural overhaul the building has received since it was rebuilt after the British burned it in 1814. The Tiffany glass screen, which Arthur had installed with such ceremony 20 years earlier, is removed. The interior is stripped and rebuilt. The executive offices are moved into a new separate structure, the West Wing, which removes the public traffic from the family floor for the first time in the history of the building. This is a significant change. You have been managing the flow of that public traffic for 30 years. The removal of it does not reduce your work. It changes the quality of it, making the family floor genuinely private in a way it has never been before, which means the intimacy of what you see and hear up there becomes more concentrated. What happens on the second floor now stays on the second floor in a more complete sense, and you adjust to this the same way you have adjusted to every structural change in the building's history, by taking note of the new configuration and proceeding. The renovation takes most of 1902. During the renovation, much of the domestic staff is temporarily reassigned. You are not temporarily reassigned. You are kept on to manage the linens and the service areas that remain in operation through the construction. You move through a house that is partially demolished around you, carrying your buckets past plasterers and carpenters and electricians installing the new electric wiring that replaces the gas lines in most of the main rooms. You have carried buckets through worse. The new electric lights, when they are finally turned on, are different from the gas, harder, more even, without the warm movement of flame. The rooms look different under them. You spend a week adjusting to the new quality of light on the surfaces you clean, because electric light falls differently than gas light, and your standard requires you to see what you are doing accurately. You adjust. The new lights stay. By 1905, the White House has a telephone system with extensions on each floor, a thing that would have been science fiction when you arrived in 1870. You use the telephone twice in the first year it is available to the domestic staff, and you find it impressive and slightly unsettling, a voice coming from a box with no body attached, and then you find it useful, and then you stop thinking about it at all. This is how progress works in your experience. Everything that was startling becomes ordinary. Everything that was ordinary was once startling. William Howard Taft arrives in March of 1909, and the Roosevelt years end in the particular way that energetic things end, all at once, leaving the air around them briefly emptied. Taft is a very large man. He weighs, by most accounts, somewhere between 300 and 330 pounds, and his presence in the physical spaces of the house has a different quality from every other man who has occupied them. The furniture that was adequate for his predecessors requires consideration. The bathtub, which was installed under Roosevelt, is too small for him, and a new one is ordered and installed. A 4-legged iron tub that is 60 inches long and 41 inches wide, large enough, it is said, to accommodate 4 average-sized men. You make a note about the tub in the practical sense. The surround requires different cleaning. The legs create corners. You adjust. You have always adjusted. Taft's wife, Helen, is a woman of considerable intelligence and political awareness, who had, as far as you can determine from the evidence available to you, a more active role in arranging her husband's political career than is customarily attributed to wives, and who arrives at the White House with opinions about its management that are specific and detailed. She has opinions about the household staff. You hear about these opinions through the normal channels through which information moves in this house, which is to say through the kitchen and the linen room and the back corridor, where things are spoken plainly that would not be spoken in the presence of the family. The opinions concern efficiency. More specifically, they concern which members of the domestic staff are efficient and which are not. And the process of arriving at these assessments involves a period of observation that you have experienced before under other administrations, but that feels different this time. Or perhaps you are simply more aware of it, because you are 59 years old and your knees are a daily negotiation, and you are aware, in a way you were not aware 10 years ago, of the finite quality of things. You are efficient. You have been efficient for 39 years. You do not require anyone to tell you this. But you note the observation period. You note it the same way you note everything, without display, without alteration of your pace, continuing to do the work at the standard you have always done the work. Because the standard is not something you adjust according to whether someone is watching. The standard is the standard. It has always been the standard. You press the family linens on the mangle with the same tension in your forearms you have used since 1872. You set the table with the same measurement between covers. You fold the napkins in the same 9 steps. You carry the coal. You count the inventory. You are always already there before anyone needs to check if you are there. In the fall of 1909, Helen Taft has a stroke. She is 47 years old. She does not die, but the stroke takes her speech for a time, and the recovery is long and uncertain. And the upper floor of the White House in the months that follow has a quality similar to the quality it had during the Garfield summer, a watchful stillness over everything, a household holding its breath. You have held your breath in this house before. You know how long it can last. You bring the morning trays. You change the linens. You move quietly through the rooms, which is not a new skill for you. It is simply the skill you have always had, applied again in a new necessity. By 1911, you have been in this building for 41 years. 41 years. You think about this sometimes in the early mornings when you are walking to work. The 12 minutes from your room to the service entrance, the same 12 minutes you have been walking for 4 decades, the same streets though they have changed around you, the same city though it is larger and louder and faster than it was in 1870 when you first arrived from Culpeper County, with a single bag and a letter of introduction from a woman named Mrs. Hemings. Mrs. Hemings has been dead for 17 years. You think about her on these mornings. She had a quality of certainty about the correct way to do things that never admitted the possibility that the correct way might be otherwise. And you understand now, at 62, that this certainty was not natural confidence, but was constructed, built up deliberately over years of working in places where the margin for error was 0 and the cost of error was borne entirely by her. You constructed the same certainty. You carry it the same way. It is load-bearing. Thomas, your nephew, is now 43 years old, and he is no longer setting type at the Richmond Planet. He is writing for it. He writes about the law, about cases that come through the Virginia courts, about the slow grinding machinery of justice in a state that has been doing everything in its power since 1883 to restrict the rights that Reconstruction briefly extended. He writes clearly and without ornament, which is a thing you respect. Clarity without ornament, it is the standard you apply to everything. He visits Washington in 1910, and you have dinner together at your table in your room. Your room is the same room it has been for 20 years, the same bed and chair and table, the same east-facing window that gets the morning light. The room is different now in the way that rooms get different when a person has occupied them long enough. There are books on the shelf that were not there before, 4 of them, and a small framed photograph of your mother taken before she died, and the account book that has been replaced twice and is now in its 3rd volume. Thomas sits in the chair, and you sit on the edge of the bed, and you eat the dinner you cooked on the small brazier in the corner, salt pork and greens and cornbread, and he tells you about Richmond, and you tell him about the house, and neither of you says the things underneath what you are saying, but both of you know them. He says, before he leaves, "You have given more to that building than it will ever give back." You say, "Most things are like that." He looks at you for a moment. Then he puts on his coat and goes. You wash the dishes. You put them in their place. You blow out the lamp. In March of 1913, Woodrow Wilson is inaugurated as the 28th President of the United States, and the Taft administration ends, and you perform the 3 hours for the 7th time. 7 administrations. 6 complete remakings of this house. You know, while you are doing it this time, that you are counting. You did not count before, not consciously, but this time you count, which is its own kind of information. Wilson arrives as a former university president, a professor's precision about him, a quality of careful arrangement that applies to ideas as much as to spaces. His wife, Ellen, is a painter, a serious one, not in the dilettante fashion, but with actual training and actual commitment, and she brings to the White House a quality of attention to visual things that you recognize from other first ladies, but that in her case is connected to something more technical than taste. She wants light in the rooms. She asks about the window treatments on the 2nd floor, how they might be adjusted to let in more of the morning sun. You tell her. You tell her precisely which windows face east, which face south, how the morning light crosses the entrance hall in the early hours, the angle of it at different seasons, what it touches and when. She listens. She adjusts 3 of the window treatments based on what you said. The rooms are lighter. You notice the difference every morning for a month. Ellen Wilson dies in August of 1914 of Bright's disease. She has been in the house for 16 months. You change the linens. You put fresh flowers in the correct vases. You have done this before. You do it again. It is 1914, and you are 66 years old, and you have been in this house for 43 years, and you have served 11 presidents across 10 administrations, and you have outlasted every single one of them. You know, in the way that a body knows things before the mind will admit them, that you are in the last years of this work. Not because you have been told. You have not been told anything. Your position is intact, your competence unquestioned, your standard unchanged. But the knees are worse this year than last year. And there is something in your lower back that appeared in the winter and that the flannel wrapping does not entirely address. And the detail work, the silver work, the fine polishing, requires you to hold the pieces closer to the lamp than you used to need to. These things are true. You do not stop, but you are counting. In the years between 1909 and 1914, the country outside the White House becomes louder on a different set of questions. The labor question, the women's suffrage question, the question of what this country owes the people who built it and have been waiting for an accounting ever since. These questions come through the kitchen in the newspapers every morning. You read them the way you have always read them, carefully, without comment, taking in the argument from each direction before arriving at your own position. Your own position on most of these questions has been fixed for many years and does not require the newspaper to form. But the newspaper tells you where the argument is, which is its own kind of useful information. In 1912, Wilson wins the presidency on a platform that includes language about equality and fairness, and there is in the Negro press a cautious hope about what this language might mean in practice. You have seen cautious hope before. You have seen what tends to happen to it. You read the newspapers. You count the linen. You go to work. The Wilson administration, as it unfolds through 1913 and into 1914, demonstrates the gap between language and practice in a way that is not new, but that has a particular bitterness to it, given the language that preceded it. The federal government under Wilson begins a process of racial segregation in its offices and departments, reversing integrated practices that had existed in federal employment since Reconstruction. Separate bathrooms, separate cafeterias, a deliberate and systematic reintroduction of the visible architecture of separation into the buildings of the federal government. The White House domestic staff is not formally affected. The White House has its own structure, but the air changes. You have lived in changing air for the length of your entire working life. You know what this particular change means. You know what it has always meant. You change the linens. You go to work. On a morning in November of 1914, you arrive at the service entrance at 4:30 and go first, as you always do, to the linen room. You count 130 sheets, 48 pillowcases, 41 towels of various grades, 8 sets of the state guest room covers, one set newer than the others, purchased in 1912 when the oldest set finally wore past use. Everything accounted for. Everything in its place. You close the linen room door. You stand in the service corridor for a moment, in the early dark, with the smell of the house around you, coal smoke and linen, and the faint underpresent that you have never been able to name, but that has been in this building every morning since the day you arrived, something older than the families that have moved through it, something in the walls themselves. You know this smell the way you know the sound of your own breathing. You go to begin the day. The coal bucket is heavy. It is always heavy. You lift it. You take the first step up. Your knee considers the question. You proceed. You have always proceeded. This building has been in your hands for 43 years. Not your hands alone. There were others. There were the women in the laundry who taught you the standard before you had earned it. There was Mrs. Hemmings, who looked at you in a doorway in 1869 and said you had the right kind of quiet about you. There were the dozens of men and women who worked alongside you and before you and after you. The ones whose names are not in any record of this place. The ones whose labor is invisible inside every formal event that will ever be written about. Inside every dinner described in every memoir of every president who has slept in this house. There was Mary, who worked the South Corridor rooms for 15 years and who left in 1895 to care for her mother in Baltimore, and whom you never saw again after the last morning she handed you her keys. There was the young woman whose name you have almost lost now, who worked the laundry in 1877 and who pressed linen with a speed you have never seen matched, and who was gone one morning without explanation, the way people go from this kind of work, suddenly and without ceremony. You remember her hands. You do not remember her name. This is one of the sorrows of this kind of work. The faces and the hands accumulate, and the names slip, and you are left with the residue of the labor without the names attached to it, which is exactly the way this building treats all of you. You carry it anyway. All of it. The named and the unnamed. All of that work. All of those hands. You reach the top of the stairs. You set down the bucket. You breathe. The house is quiet around you. The clock somewhere down the hall marks the half hour. 4:30. The day is beginning. Outside the east window, the sky is still dark, a deep November dark without stars, and the city below it is asleep, or as close to asleep as this city ever gets, which is not very close. You have been walking these streets since 1870. You have watched this city grow up around you, watched it become the thing it was always trying to become, which is enormous and various and contradictory and loud. A city that contains everything and reconciles nothing. A city that puts the houses of power on its hills and the houses of the powerless in its lowlands, and calls the distance between them progress. You have your own views about progress. You do not share them at work. You pick up the bucket. You begin the first fire. The kindle catches. You feed it slowly, the way you have fed 10,000 fires in this building, small pieces first, then larger, letting the heat build rather than forcing it, because a fire built carefully will hold and a fire built in haste will go out. You know this. You have always known this. The room begins to warm around you. The light from the grate falls across the floor in a moving pattern, and you watch it for a moment because you have earned this 43 years in, a moment of watching the fire before you move to the next task. The painting at the end of the corridor is crooked. You will straighten it on your way past. You always straighten it on your way past. You do not know who tilts it. You have never known. It is the small mystery of this house that has been yours for longer than any other mystery here. Yours to check and yours to correct. The small ritual that belongs entirely to you and that belongs to no record of this building. Tomorrow it will be crooked again. You will straighten it again. This is the work, not the great events, not the names in the history books, not the dinners that will be written about. and the meetings that will be analyzed, and the decisions that will be traced forward through 100 years of consequence. This, the fire, the floor, the painting on the wall, the house held together by hands that worked here, and worked here, and worked here, and left no mark that anyone could read except the mark of the house itself, standing, maintained, ready. You fold the morning into your body and you begin, step by step, room by room, the way you have always begun. The day opens around you like a door. You walk through it. You have always walked through it. And the house, which does not know your name, which will never know your name, keeps standing. Because of you. Because of your hands. Because of the quiet that Mrs. Hemings saw in you in 1869, and that you carried into this building, and that you have been carrying ever since, through 8 presidencies and 7 renovations and 2 assassinations, and the slow turning of decades into something that feels at this hour, in this corridor, in this particular quality of early morning dark, less like the passage of time than like the accumulation of something that does not have a name but that is real. Real as the floor under your feet. Real as the coal in the bucket. Real as the fire you just built, burning now in the grate, steady and sufficient. Doing what it was made to do. The same as you. The house settles around you in the early cold. The clock marks the quarter hour. You move to the next room. You have so many rooms still to do. You begin them the way you have always begun them, one at a time, with your hands, with your standard, without complaint. The city outside is beginning to stir. The first light is still an hour away. But you know it is coming. You have always known it was coming. You carry that knowledge with you down the corridor. Room by room, fire by fire, morning by morning, for as long as there is work to do. You have never left it undone. You will not leave it undone now. Good night. If this story found you, please consider subscribing to Quiet History at Bedtime. A like or a notification means more than you know. Sleep well.